This week on RadioActive, I welcome back to the show Annie Hornish, who is co-founder of the Compassionate Living Project. And this election season, she has decided to run for office in Connecticut's 62nd District, representing Granby, New Hartford, and parts of East Granby and Barkhamsted. So we'll talk about her platform and why she decided to run, and some of her connections between her activism and her choice to run for office. So, Annie, welcome back to RadioActive.
Thank you, Kevin.
Well, it's good to have you back, and let's just start with a little bit of background before we even get into the electoral stuff.
Okay.
You are co-founder of the Compassionate Living Project.
Yes.
So explain briefly for our listeners, what is the Compassionate Living Project?
Oh, the Compassionate Living Project, it's a 501c3 nonprofit humane education organization, and what we do is promote what we call ethical consumerism. And the goal of the Compassionate Living Project is a society of well-educated citizens with strong critical thinking skills. We espouse that we're all obliged to know as much as we can, in particular with our consumer choices, so that with our consumer choices we make decisions that reflect our personal beliefs. And, in that way we avoid practices that, could hurt people, the environment, and or animals. And so that ties in with the work that I'd like to do as representative in a number of ways, most notably with my desire to help out with what's called results-based accountability.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel the legislature needs to review, honestly, how money is being spent to ensure that it's being used efficiently, and that we control spending without sacrificing vital social services. And in the same way, in my experience as a humane educator, I've learned that only by looking openly and honestly at the problems will feasible alternatives present themselves.
So I will say, as we're proceeding into the electoral talk, that
Yep.
I have an open invitation to your rivals, your competitors for the office. If they would like to appear on this program, I'd be happy to oblige them.
Okay.
And so I do want to make that offer. That's a policy we have here at the radio station. I'd be perfectly willing to talk to any of your opponents for the 62nd District
Yes.
of the state Congress. So talk about why you chose to run. What are some of the overall reasons? Then we'll get into some of the specifics.
Sure. Well, I'm, as you may know or may not know, I'm a lifelong Connecticut resident, actually lifelong North Central Connecticut resident, and I have ties here, and I'm firmly committed to our state and its future. And I believe that we need new leadership to make, our home a better place to live, to work, to raise a family. And I strongly believe that it's time for a change. I have many concerns that I feel demand change. I'm concerned about, the fact that we live in one of the richest states and one of the richest countries in the world, and still have citizens who may have to decide this winter between staying warm, eating, or buying medications.
Mm-hmm.
I'm concerned about our economy, the long-term, especially the long-term economic competitiveness of businesses in our state.
Mm-hmm.
In particular, small businesses. I can get into that later. I'm concerned about the quality of education for our children and their readiness to compete in an increasingly challenging global environment. It's different from years past. I'm also concerned about a healthcare industry for several reasons. It's not available to everyone, and it should be. And I think also that healthcare has to put a focus more on disease prevention in order to reduce costs. And probably what's very important to me is I'm concerned about significant environmental challenges that face not only Connecticut but our planet. And I've been on the campaign trail for several months now, since late May, knocking on doors and talking with people mostly. And I found that most of us, in my district at least, share these same concerns. These are big issues. Perhaps adding property taxes to that blend that I just described.
Mm-hmm.
But even then, people don't mind property taxes, I'm finding, if they find they have value for them. So it's more of an issue of they want their money used wisely.
Right.
But all the above I've described, those are all quality of life issues, and I think we need an enthusiastic, challenge of the status quo. Business as usual is not working, and I'm one of many challengers to incumbents in the legislature this year, and I'm excited to be part of that.
It's interesting. I've noticed this term, and I've interviewed a couple of these folks who are not career politicians,
Yep.
who are getting involved and deciding to run for state offices, local offices, and in some cases national offices. What do you think? What are the benefits to having folks who are? I mean, I guess other politicians would call them outsiders, but in some ways they're insiders because they're living the life of a Connecticut resident, let's say.
Right.
And they're more in touch with some of those issues. What do you see are some of your advantages as being the quote unquote outsider who's running?
Well, one thing I can bring to the table, I think, is fresh ideas and new perspectives, creative ideas. I think I can bring. I'm also not tied into any special interests or owe any groups favors. I'm not tied in with any old boys club in Hartford. That kind of thing. So I think I can definitely bring that to the table. And right there is something to be said for experience, of course. Obvious. But I think what especially in my district, what we have isn't working effectively for the citizens of the district. Mm-hmm. And I think that I can bring some, refreshing change.
Given the fact that you've been sort of on the ground, door knocking, talking to people, canvassing, and you mentioned that a lot of people seem to share similar views to yourself on some of the issues. What is your sense about their level of satisfaction with the state government, especially in the last, this past year? It's been particularly frustrating.
Yeah, I'm getting more comments actually on the federal government issues. People are very concerned about the war, more so than state issues. I'm finding in general most people aren't. The biggest comments I'm getting are home heating. How are they going to pay their home heating bills? But they also feel that's not within our control as much. Although you may be familiar with the recent home heating assistance effort that went through the legislature this year. But what people are most concerned about locally for their reps is property tax relief.
Can you describe for listeners, especially those in sort of the southern central Connecticut area, describe the district that you stand to represent, the 62nd district, geographically, economically? What are we talking about here?
Yeah, our demographic in my district tends to be upper middle class, higher than average incomes. There are sections, though, that are definitely on fixed incomes, lots of seniors who are feeling the crunch more than others. Rural, more so. Definitely suburbia. East Granby and Granby are a bit more developed, but nothing relative to the large cities in Connecticut. New Hartford, quintessential New England town, I would describe it. And Barkhamsted mostly is very rural. I don't know if you've been there, but the reservoir is absolutely gorgeous.
Well, that's a good segue to start talking about some of the issues. And the one that jumps out at me first, given the rural type of setting of the district, is environment and energy. What are your thoughts on that? What do you see yourself working towards if elected to the State General Assembly?
Well, what I feel is, we do have a duty to balance our energy demands against our environmental responsibility. And I think that, with respect to environment and environmental issues and energy costs, I think we can find creative ways to simultaneously help the environment and reduce energy costs. And just by way of example, when I've been knocking on doors, many people, I would say 3/4 of the people now have those CFL bulbs in their doorways. And that's just a simple example of what people can do to both help the environment and reduce energy costs and conserve energy. And as a legislator, thinking on a larger scale, we could do things such as mass transit. I would be a strong proponent of developing that. Commuter bicycle trails, where possible. I'm finding a big demand for that. I'm doing my canvassing on bicycle, and so I'm getting a lot of comments about that. And thanks for doing it. People appreciate that. But I think there could be a role for bicycle trails. If safe trails were built, I believe people would definitely use them. When the weather permits.